you really don't know who every person you interact with is every day, but you have a unique opportunity with every single person you interact with every day to affect their lives. Every valet person, every server at every restaurant, the mail person, your next door neighbor, your coworker, your family member, every single interaction you have is a potential relationship you build. Um, the point is that we are rich by our relationships.
Guess I'm awake now. Timeline reminded me it ain't safe now. Why would I cape now? Too real for. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the Known and Connected podcast. This is a series about how real relationships build real success. I'm your host, Kinard Robinson. In each episode, I talk with leaders about the experience and perspectives that help to shape their journey and the role that connection played along the way. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Tampa Club for being a sponsor for this episode. They have been an amazing partner. Let's get into today's conversation. I have with me Ron Christaldi. Ron, how are you?
Great. It's great to be here today. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Glad that you can be here. So for those that might be listening or watching that may not know who you are, can you just give us a brief intro about who you are and what it is you do?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm first and foremost, I'm a father of 5 kids. I'm a lawyer with the law firm of Shoemaker, Lupin Kendrick. I happen to also serve as the president and CEO of Shoemaker Advisors, our public affairs and lobby group, and am a community volunteer in a variety of organizations.
That's awesome. Awesome. I love it. And I love how, first and foremost, you're a father above all and everything. Families of the utmost importance to me. So thank you. Thank you for that. Um, so why don't we just kind of dig into your journey a little bit? How did you get to where you are today?
It's a great question, and it seems like it's been a marathon, a long journey, and I'm probably only halfway through that long journey. Um, in reflecting on it, I think hard work is the first thing that comes to mind. Um, my whole life, I am the children of parents who didn't have an opportunity to go to college, only went to high school, and were kids of immigrant parents themselves. And I was frequently told, "You're not tall enough, you're not strong enough, you don't know the right people, you don't have enough money, you're not smart enough." But what my folks taught me is you could always outwork other people. And beginning of about 10 years old with my newspaper route, which I know newspapers are delivered electronically today, so a lot of folks may not know what that meant, but when they were paper and you had to walk door to door delivering them, I started then. And through my time working at Burger King in high school, I'll tell you an interesting story about Burger King. So I was 15 years old, took a job in New Jersey at Burger King, and about 4 months into working, the regional manager came and met with me, and he asked me if I wanted a managerial position. And I told him, "Hey, I'm in high school. I have to stay in school." And he said, "Well, you can nights and weekends. Well, we can shift you around there." And so I went home and asked my folks, and they thought it was a fantastic idea. So I told him, "Okay, I'll try it." The store the company that owned that particular Burger King owned about 65 Burger Kings. And when they ran it up the corporate chain, they rejected it. They said, "We can't give a 15-year-old a combination to the safe. We can't give him the keys to the store." But this one fella believed in me, asked me if I could take a day off from school, drove me up to North New Jersey to meet in a conference room with these 4 guys who were probably in their 40s or 50s, and I was 15 at the time, and I'm sure I looked ridiculous. But after 2 hours, they gave me a shot, and as a 15-year-old, I was doing HR schedules and bank deposits and inventory, and just learned an incredible amount, worked really hard in that experience. Some of the most important life lessons I got really were through those early jobs from newspapers to Burger King and on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, and one of the things that I take away from that story is the fact that someone believed in you. You know, even though you may not have seen it, and ultimately you didn't want to do it, right? Um, Although there were other people that heard, and their first thought was absolutely not. Uh, that person said, "No, we're not gonna let this stop us. I believe in you. I think this could be beneficial for you. So let's take a trip. Let's have a conversation, and let's see if maybe we can change some minds, change some perspectives."
And it's it's interesting because that someone believing in me is not just a story; it's a theme throughout my life. As you're recounting that, it's various people are popping up in my head who believed in me, gave me a shot.
Mm-hmm.
You can't underestimate how important those shots are. You can't not take them with 100% and attack them and wrestle them to the ground and pin them. But you can't do it without those opportunities. And I'm very blessed and thankful that I've had many of those over the course of my life. Many people who believed in me.
So just kind of continuing in that same vein, um, what would you say has uh, shaped you the most in your early years? Would it be that particular story, or is there something else that stands out to you?
Yeah, that's a great question too. The thing that comes to my mind was when I was in fifth grade, um, and I don't think they would do this in schools quite this way today, but the two teachers pretended that they had had a fender bender in the parking lot. And in front of the fifth grade class, they started yelling and shouting at each other. One storms off, comes back with a fake gun, and pretends to shoot the other. And then they pick one of us to be a prosecuting lawyer and one of us to be a defending lawyer and hold a trial. And I got picked. They did it in 5 schools. And I got picked at my school to be the defense lawyer. And my mom, bless her, took me to Camden, New Jersey to meet with a public defender to give me some advice. And the public defender said, well, it sounds like she was pretty hot at the moment, and maybe it wasn't her normal personality, and maybe she had temporarily lost her sanity. Maybe you can plead temporary insanity. So I went back and asked my teachers, can I do this? And I'm a fifth grader, and they said, sure. So they appointed another boy to be a young guy, Matt was his name, to be a psychiatrist. And we tried the case. And of the 5 schools, I was the only one that got a defense verdict. And in fifth grade, I knew that day I was going to be a lawyer and never looked back from that. And so, as odd as that experience sort of was in a way, it put me on a path that, 45 years later, I'm still on that journey. And I think I read recently that the teacher who was my fifth grade teacher passed away. Never really got a chance to talk to her about the impact she had on me then. But for all the teachers out there, know that you're doing those kinds of things all day, every day.
Wow, that's definitely. I'm learning so much about you. This is awesome. So thinking about that, you know, from that day in the fifth grade to now, I'm sure there were a number of obstacles along the way. Um, Maybe there were times that you questioned whether you wanted to stay on the path and be an attorney. I'm not sure, but can you maybe talk through, how that journey has been becoming an attorney? Were there ever points where you questioned it, and what were the things that helped you stay on track?
Yeah. I've never questioned it. I've never questioned continuing to move forward, right? It's part of my DNA to never give up, to be tenacious, to keep moving. I think that's part of what my folks, my grandparents instilled in me and my mentors. But I will also say in that same vein, every day there's roadblocks. Every day there's times where you trip and fall and you can't feel like you can't get up and you can't move forward. There's a line in one of the Rocky movies where he tells his son, life is not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And I've always remembered that line. And what I would tell folks is when you see someone who's successful, it's easy to think they got all the breaks, they had an easy life, it moves forward. No one's life is easy. Everyone's life has bumps and things that stick them in the mud, things that knock them down. It's that determination to keep getting up, keep moving forward, not letting those setbacks. For every case that I've won, there have been cases I've lost. For every client that I've brought in, there's been clients I lost. For every relationship that's been fruitful, there have been ones that have failed. We all have those. Those are not things that we should be ashamed of. Those are things we should grab hold of and learn from and build upon. And that's really, in my opinion, the recipe for success.
I appreciate you sharing that. What's interesting is one of my best friends sent me a social media clip this morning, and the social media clip was of a gentleman explaining the concept of be careful about making judgments about people, particularly good judgments. And the analogy that he used was uh, watching a plane flying in the sky. He said from the ground, it looks like they're flying smooth, there are no issues, but little do you know, they could be experiencing turbulence. So for the people that are on the plane, it could be a bumpy ride, it could be a scary ride. But to you on the ground, it looks like it's 100% going extremely well. So being aware of, what it is you decide to take a look at and evaluate, especially from the outside looking in, you never know what people are going through. Right?
Yes.
And even though someone is on the path to success, or maybe in your eyes, they've already reached that, level of success that maybe you desire, you don't really know what they went through to get there or what they may be going through currently.
And have an empathy, because that's an excellent analogy. And everybody on that plane is having a slightly different experience. One person's headed to a wedding, another person's headed to a funeral, another person's headed to a business meeting. Each person is experiencing that flight in a very different way. Having empathy for others, understanding that they've got things going on in their life is super important. And not feeling sorry for yourself when you hit those knocks. So I'll tell you a story. When I was early in my career, I served on a board of directors of a youth program. And I actually served on that board for 17 years, but this particular year I was chair of the board. And our biggest problem, we had kids and this particular program was boys, between the ages of 13 and 18 who had been convicted with felonies. And as an alternative to incarcerating them, they went into this program to rehabilitate, which was heavy on, in this particular instance, heavy on education and environmental programs, things outdoors. Our biggest problem was once a kid graduated from the program, they went back into their home environment. And what I took away from my 17 years in participating in this program was that it didn't matter if a child was rich or poor, or black or white, or male or female, frankly. It mattered whether they had good parents. And most of these kids who were troubled were going back into family environments that were not good for them. And so we decided to develop an aftercare program where kids would have something to do after they got out of our program. And it was a residential program, so the kids would live there while they were in the program. So a friend of mine was a banker in town. He had a rental home in Brandon, 5-bedroom house, agreed to rent it to the program for $1 a year. Very kind and generous of him. But the deal was if something bad starts to happen, he can cancel that. Picked 4 kids, graduated them from the program. They went to live there. We had a staff person who was going to live there full time. And the newspaper started writing stories calling it a halfway house, which it wasn't a halfway house. And of course, when the neighbors read the stories about a halfway house on their block, they started to get nervous. We did everything we could. We had block parties. Kids were cutting the neighbors' lawns for free, doing everything we could to be good neighbors. No problems at all. But the perception persisted. I went and met with the editorial board. It was then the Tampa Tribune. And for 2 hours, I explained to them the difference between a halfway house and what we were doing. No one was sentenced to be there. Next day, the headline was more concerns about halfway house in Brandon. So the banker called me and said, Ron, I hate to say this, but I'm getting some pressure on my side. We've got to shut it down. And I went and met with those 4 kids. And honestly, it was the toughest thing that I've done in my life, because they're saying to me, Mr. Ron, what did we do wrong? Nothing. Where are we going to go? I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. I'm sorry. But we've got 30 days. We're going to have to figure something out. Well, that night after I met with them, was a retired doctor who had preceded me as board chair. And we went and had a drink, and we're talking it through. And I said to him, why is this happening to me? Why couldn't this have happened last year when you were chair, next year? And I'll never forget this moment. He kind of got a little stern with me, and he said, that's the wrong question to ask. It's happening to you because you volunteered to be the chair of this organization, and you knew that this organization was going to need your help, and you were going to have to lean in, and you were going to guide it through the tough times. And then he said something profound to me, which is, get used to it, because the type of person you are, you're going to be volunteering for these things the rest of your life, and these things are going to find themselves to you again and again and again. And that wisdom that he gave me that night has gotten me through a lot of bad situations. I never ask myself, why me anymore? Many organizations that I've been on the board of and chaired of find themselves in times of trouble. Many of my clients find themselves in times of trouble. We're not there to avoid tough times. We're there to get ourselves through tough times and get our friends and colleagues and community members through tough times. So I would say that to everybody, really. You shouldn't never ask yourself, why me? Don't feel sorry for yourself. It's an opportunity. It's a positive thing. That was going to happen, but I get the opportunity to be there and try to guide my friends, my colleagues, my community through that opportunity.
I love that. I love that. So one of the primary things I take away from that is the importance of mentorship, right? And you and I discussed previously, the idea of nature versus nurture, and certain environments that you're in, and ultimately, being able to surround yourself with good people can really help get you through certain situations, right? Because they might bring a perspective that you had not previously thought about. So you spoke about the gentleman that was the previous board chair, and I'm sure that him, along with maybe some others, have been mentors to you over the years. How can you elaborate on how mentorship has helped you to get to where you are?
Yeah. I mean, I've had too many mentors to mention them all. Some immediately come to mind. One particular, David Delapart, was always a very patient person with me. But what I would tell folks is, I think a lot of people feel like mentorship needs to be this formal thing where you designate someone your mentor and they're constantly like your teacher in an elementary school. You walk in and they're telling you what to do. I don't think it's about that. I think it's about being first and foremost self-aware. If you're reflective on your own performance, if every time something doesn't go your way, you say to yourself, how could I have done this differently? What could I have done to control this? How could I change the outcome next time? And then you ask those questions of people with more experience of you. I think what you'll find is people are very willing to help you not make the mistakes that they made. If you're not self-aware, if you constantly believe your way is the right way, you're never going to absorb that wisdom. But if you are self-aware, you continually question yourself as to what could I do better next time, and you offer those around you the opportunity to lean in and help you do that. What I've found is there's a wealth of knowledge out there, right? There's no need to recreate the wheel. It's been invented again and again and again. And there are a lot of folks in your day-to-day life who are willing to kind of impart that wisdom on you. You just got to be open to it.
I like that, and one of the things that stand out to me is the idea of uh, positioning, right? And what I mean by that is, one of the principles I kind of embedded into Next Known is professional positioning, doing your best to make sure that you're in the right place at the right time, right? And part of that comes down to being self-aware, recognizing that you don't know what you don't know, um, and always looking to be of service in some capacity, right? And being able to do that can help you learn, help you grow, but also help you to make that impact. And as long as you're ready, willing, and able, then to your point, the others that are around you will notice the things that you're doing or attempting to do and be more than willing to impart some wisdom, perspective, or something along those lines.
Yep, it's absolutely true. When I was in law school, um, I was the editor. Went to Florida State University for my law school, and I was the editor in chief of one of the publications there. It's called the Land. It's like a law review called the Land Use and Environmental Journal. And the dean had brokered a Harvard law professor to come and speak and publish an article in our journal, which was a very prestigious opportunity for us, a very important opportunity for us. The person came and spoke, and when she submitted the article, it was about what's called environmental justice, basically the siting of hazardous waste facilities and chemical plants in poor and disadvantaged communities. And I read the article, I read the draft article, and I felt like the arguments in it were advocacy for a certain position and that it was going to be used potentially to hurt disadvantaged communities. So I decided as the editor in chief, we're not going to publish this article. So I called my editorial board together, and we're students, right? We're just trying to get a degree and get a job. And there was panic on everybody's face. Like, what are you talking about? The dean told us we have to do this. This person's a Harvard law professor. We can't not publish the article. And my position was, I'm the editor in chief, for better or for worse, and I make the decision. And I'm not going to volunteer my time to further something that I don't feel good about. But fortunately, one of my colleagues said to me, "Can we sleep on it? You've had some time to think about it. We're just learning about it now. Why don't we sleep on it? Get back together tomorrow. And in the meantime, why don't you and I go out and have a cup of coffee?" And we did, and we started to talk it through. And this guy was absolutely brilliant. And what he said to me is, I'm thinking about this a little bit, and this woman's a Harvard law professor, wrote an article that's already done and funded. Chances are it's going to get published somewhere else if we don't publish it. Chances are it's going to get published in Harvard's Law Review, and it'll get a lot of press. We can't suppress that. But what about the marketplace of ideas? What if we recruit a counter article and publish them together so that people can draw their own conclusions, but they have all the information? And I have to tell you, it was a brilliant idea. I wish I could take any credit for it. It wasn't my idea. We went to the dean. The dean thought it was a fantastic idea. We called the professor, and she said, "Sure, as long as I have a fair opportunity to respond in kind to the other article." We found the other most prominent professor in that area. He was from North Carolina at the time. We delayed publishing. We published those two together. What came of that is a FAMU professor then picked up on it and went to the legislature in Florida and got some funding to do a study on those things in Florida and publish some real life data on what was happening in Florida. So that ability of me at that moment to just take a step back and not be super headstrong on it. I was pretty headstrong on it, but at least listen, and recognize that an idea that wasn't mine was a really good idea, resulted in a much more balanced set of information getting out there and funding for more facts and information to get out there. And I think at the end of the day, the data was stronger and the outcomes were more positive because of that path. So it was a lesson to me to ask questions and listen.
So, did you find that by asking questions and listening, that those things, those traits, that you were, you know, thoughtfully exercising? Did you find that by doing that, that it led you to leadership positions more than not, um, unintentionally, or were you always actively thinking about how can I take a leadership role to make an impact?
Yeah. I've always followed the what I'll call the George Washington model of leadership, the reluctant leader, meaning that I never seek out a position. Um, but what I find is if you're oriented toward lifting other people up and problem solving, which I try to be, and that's just more of a, honestly, more of a humility than anything else. I appreciate the talents of the people around me, because they are talented, more talented than me, and I try to lean on that and prop that up. And because of that, I've had the opportunity to not only be on boards, for instance, in the community, but to chair those boards. So in the past 2 years, I've chaired the Leadership Florida Board. I'm currently chair of the Tampa Museum of Art Board. I just finished a term of chairing the board of the Tampa Bay Economic Development Council. I'm on the board of the African American Arts and Cultural Center, vice chair of New College's Board of Trustees, and some other things too. I don't want to bore the people listening here. Um, in none of those instances that I asked to be the chair or the vice chair, um, but the opportunity arises where the need is there. And what I find is that leading is really just being able to coalesce the collective wisdom of the group. When you start to believe that you know better than other people and than everybody, particularly the collective wisdom of the group, typically you fail. It's that collective thought that you bring together and building a camaraderie amongst people, which is it sounds very easy, right? We're all familiar with sports teams that have a lot of talent on them, can't win a game because they're not playing as a team, right? So you can put a leadership group together that has a lot of talent, but if everybody's working at cross purposes and not pulling together, not trusting each other, and that's really what the leader's job is to coalesce that group, foster the trust amongst each other, find the commonalities and ideas, and give everyone the path and the direction, but leverage that collective talent of the group. It's what a coach does in sports.
Yeah, no, I can't speak to how often it happens to see those types of teams where uh, they are supremely talented, but for whatever reason, it never clicks. And actually, I remember playing high school football, and there was a particular team in the area that, on paper, they were far more talented than we were. They had better athletes. I mean, it was just was across the board. It wasn't close, but they could never beat us because we were better coached than they were.
Yeah.
We were more disciplined, and we executed more often than not better than they did. So therefore, when it came time for us to play, yes, they had some amazing plays. Yes, there were some close games, but at the end of the day, we were able to pull it off. And it comes down to the coaching. It comes down to the leadership. It comes down to the discipline, and really thinking about leadership, just the coach and player level.
Yes.
Right. I think it's important to have both.
Yes, absolutely.
So, thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned uh, most people have this idea that finding a mentor or mentorship is something that's very structured and very this is the way that it should be done. When truthfully, you could find mentorship anywhere, and you can provide mentorship anywhere.
Yes.
Right. Um, uh, you are one of my mentors, and although, like you said, we haven't formally discussed it, from the day that we met, I realized that you were someone that I wanted to strive to be like in a lot of ways. And it's, how you carry yourself, how you talk with people, how you are a servant leader. When you stand up, people listen, and people recognize the value that you bring because of the impact that you have. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you for you being you, and you lending your time to me. Um, for our conversations and all the other perspectives that you may share with me. So thank you.
It's my pleasure, and the feeling is mutual, very much so.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. So with that being said, I want to be sure that people recognize that as they're learning and growing, finding people that you can talk to, that you can count on, people that are going to hold you accountable, whether it's a mentorship in a formal sense, a mentorship in an informal sense, that it's extremely important to just overall growth and development. So maybe can you speak to how along your path you discovered some of your mentors, whether they were formal or informal?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, people don't fully appreciate sometimes the difference between a transaction and a relationship.
Mm.
You get onto the Target website and you buy a notebook and they ship it to your house. That's a transaction. You walk into Target and you hand the cashier your notebook to buy it. That's a relationship. And you really don't know who every person you interact with is every day, but you have a unique opportunity with every single person you interact with every day to affect their lives. Every valet person, every server at every restaurant, the mail person, your next door neighbor, your coworker, your family member, every single interaction you have is a potential relationship you build. When I was a young lawyer, one of my mentors said to me, it's more important to know the judicial assistant than it is to know the judge. The judicial assistant keeps the judge's calendar, so if you need to get on the hearing calendar soon and you're not in the good graces of the JA, it may be 4 months before you can even talk to the judge about it. But if that person has an opportunity to put you on sooner and they can do it and they want to do it, they will be able to do it. I'm using that as a hypothetical example, but the point is that we are rich by our relationships. If you ever get a chance, go back and watch the old Jim Stewart movie, It's a Wonderful Life. Movie, black and white movie, Christmas time classic. But in it, the point is that he passes on lots of opportunities to make money, passes on lots of opportunities to engage in transactions that would take him to other places of the world or make him rich. But at the end of the day, what the angel shows him is that he is very rich because he has all these relationships he's loved. And so for me, it goes back to building up that wealth of a network of relationships. And I can't tell you, I'm going to tell you a story, right? As this is like the ultimate of how relationships work. I was in Germany closing a transaction, and the local lawyer took us out to dinner, and then afterward we were in Frankfurt, took us to have a beer at a beer garden in Frankfurt, which I had never been to before. It was a fantastic experience, and you're sitting at these really long, hundreds of feet long picnic tables out on the Main River with strangers sharing a beer. The group that was sitting next to me was from London, British folks, and the woman told me that she was with a hotel chain in London. And I did my Tampa Bay thing. I gave her the card and I said, if you all have never been to Tampa Bay, it's a wonderful place. You have to come visit. There's lots of good business opportunities. There's wonderful beaches. There's, wonderful people. It's a great place to be. Arts and culture, etc. When I got home to the United States, I just followed up with each of them with an email. It was a pleasure to meet you. If you ever make it to the United States, would love to host you guys for dinner. About 3 months later, flying with my children, my 3 kids who were little, which was me and the 3 of them at the time, to Rome, and we're flying through Gatwick Airport in London. And I did not know this at the time, but British Airways had gotten hacked, and lots and lots and lots of flights were getting canceled that day. So we land at Gatwick. When we land, they tell us our connecting flight's been canceled. I've got to take my 3 small children, get our bags, go through customs, get out of the airport onto a bus and take a bus to Heathrow Airport to catch another flight to Rome, which we do. Not easily, but we do. When we get to Heathrow Airport, those flights begin to get canceled too. 50,000 or so flights were canceled that day around the world. I'm in a massive line now to get out of the airport with no bags, and I've got no place to stay in London. And it hits me, maybe this woman could help me. And so I text her. You might remember we met in Frankfurt 3 months ago. I could use some help. I'm willing to pay for it. Would you mind helping me? 10 minutes later, I get a text. I've reserved you a suite at our 5-star hotel. Do you need transportation? It was a car service waiting outside the airport for us. We wound up having a nice night in London. Got back on a flight the next day to Rome. It was a longer story, but had I not made that connection, my life that night would have been chaos. I'm not even sure if we would have found a place to stay because there were so many people in London looking for hotel rooms. That's not any kind of particular advantage that I got by being successful or rich or because I'm not or anything like that. It was just by being nice to a person at a beer garden in Frankfurt. I've got 100 of those stories. We all have those stories, right? Where we all need help along the way. None of us go through life without needing help along the way. And it's just that little network of people you're kind to along the way, and you connect with them, you stay in touch with them. Those relationships are really what helps. It wasn't me getting that hotel room was not a transaction. It was a relationship.
Thank you for sharing it. And as you said, we all have those types of stories. And actually, I have one, and I was debating on if I was going to share it out and about, but um, I'm going to. And I think that it's important to understand how close things can be, right? Um, so business this year in 2025 has been pretty difficult as an entrepreneur, right? I own a marketing agency, as you know, and I found that whenever there's economic uncertainty, marketing is typically one of the first things that are on the chopping block, right? So, needless to say, that finances have been a little tight. It's been a little stressful. And a couple of weeks ago, my finance company started the repossession process on my truck. And I didn't know it exactly when it happened until my tow truck was in my driveway. So I run outside, and the gentleman tells me that, truck's being repossessed. You can get your stuff out of it. Uh, if you want to get it back, you have to call your finance company and work it out with them. And once they give us the all clear, you can get your truck back. Okay, cool. So this was on a Wednesday. I call right away, and they tell me that I have to call back on Friday because there's no way for them to tell me until everything processes through the system. Okay, cool. So I call back on the Friday, and they tell me, so basically I can get my truck back, but I'm going to pay the full balance that I owe of the past due amount, and before I could get it back. And I have until uh, basically I have 2 weeks, like 2 weeks to the day, to get my truck back. If I don't get the money by that 2 week mark, that Friday, that my truck could be sold. So of course I go into panic mode, because if I don't have my truck, not only is it not good because there's a repossession in my credit report, but now I also don't have a vehicle, so that further reduces any opportunity I have to get back on track.
Yeah.
Right. And I just start making phone calls to a degree, and well, not right away because pride was playing a role, and there were things that I did not want to put out there, but it got to a point to where I needed to reach out to my trusted people in my network, and not to ask for a handout, but to ask if they were aware of any possibilities, any potential contracts. If anyone needed any help with any sort of video production or anything like that, just to be able to try and get this money so I can get my truck back. So over the next, week and a half, I was talking to different folks, and one of the individuals that I called, and they didn't even pop up in my mind right away. It wasn't until this just random moment I'm sitting, just my mind is just wandering. It's like, well, why don't you reach out to this person? So I reached out to them, and we had previously talked about my company potentially doing some video for their company, but for whatever reason, it just never happened. And I give this person a call, and they can kind of hear in my voice that something's not right. So I tell them the situation, and they're like, "Oh my God, Kinard, I'm so sorry. Like, how can I help?" So, well, I remember some time ago you and I spoke about potentially doing a video, and they were like, "Absolutely, I need it now more than ever. So, how much do you need?" So I told them the amount. They're like, "Okay, listen, send me an invoice for the amount. We'll get this taken care of right away, and we'll figure out all the details later." So I sent them an invoice, and by the end of that day, I had the money to be able to get my truck back. And in that moment, it was a realization of, this is what happens when we have good relationships. And even though it sucks to be in those types of situations, the people that you have, built the bonds with, you've invested your time, effort, and energy with, you have that rapport, to where, if a situation did come up and you were in need, you don't feel bad about making the call because it's not a transaction. You're calling your friend, right? And I think to your point, that's a very good distinction that everyone should be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that I take away from that story, and I appreciate you sharing it because I know it's personal. One is the resilience, right? You didn't fold, you didn't give up. Your first reaction was, I'm on a path to get to where I need to be. This vehicle is important to me to stay on the path, so I got to figure out a way to make this work, right? That resilience, that tenacity is part of your character, and it's why you're always going to be successful. And your relationships, that's the second part of the story, which is things that you did years before that you were harvesting at that moment. And that goes to your character. That goes to the type of person you are that is able to build that goodwill and that trust and confidence over time, where you weren't really asking for a favor. You were asking for an opportunity to do something for someone. And you were given that opportunity because people had trust and confidence in you and believed in you. So I take that as a very positive story. There's a lot of negative things that are going on that we're all dealing with. And honestly, too frequently, we don't want to talk about those negative things. But I think we all share that as a commonality. You were at the Leadership Florida annual meeting last year, and I'll share with you that one of our speakers, former NBA player Chris Herron, who suffered from drug and alcohol addiction, when we were thinking about speakers, some of the discussion around the room was, it's a heavy topic. Like we don't need that at the annual meeting for our leadership group. Maybe we shouldn't do it. But I made the call to do it because I felt like in our community in Florida, opioid usage is still going up, from what I understand, and there's still a crisis there. People still need to talk about it, and we need help. And when we were backstage, Chris says to me, I understand some people didn't want me to be here, and you kind of pushed it through. If you don't mind me asking, why? And I told him that like 10 years ago, I had seen him speak at a Congressional Chiefs of Staff luncheon in Washington, D.C. And I said, Chris, that day I realized that everybody needs to hear you speak. I wanted my children to hear you speak. I wanted my friends and colleagues to hear you speak because your message is an important one. And he got his game face on and he went out and he said, I usually don't speak at breakfast meetings, meaning like he speaks to football teams and at sporting events, not at business group meetings. But he did a fantastic job. He hit a home run, or in NBA parlance, sank a three-pointer. Most importantly, though, that night I was with a group of folks, and they were talking collectively about the speakers of that day. And when he came up, people at first exchanged a few, polite comments. You could hear a pin drop in the room. It was very powerful, those types of things. But then someone spoke up and said, my sister was found dead from an overdose earlier this year. And another fellow at the table said, well, we haven't heard from my sister in about 3 months, and we're flying out of town next week, my folks and I, to try to find her. And everyone at the table began to share stories of friends and family members who had issues and were struggling, and what they did to try to help those individuals, either themselves or indirectly. And at the end of our gathering, as we were departing, the fellow whose sister was out of state went over to the fellow whose sister had passed and said, can I get your number? I'd like to pick your brain a little bit more on what you went through. And I realized that it's only by talking about these things that we can lean on each other and get stronger and make progress, right? So there's not only no shame in telling a story, there's actually the opposite, shame in keeping it to yourself, because these aren't setbacks, these are just life. And it's how you keep moving forward. So kudos to you for telling the story. And I learned more about your resilience and your relationships, so I appreciate you sharing it with me.
Thank you. I appreciate your perspective, because and really not just your perspective, your reassurance. It is important because it is a scary thought, right? But at the same time, like we discussed earlier, it's not, it's about how hard can you get hit and get back up. Mike Tyson has the famous phrase, everybody has a plan if they get punched in the mouth, right? And it really shows you who you are, and I think that it's important for us to not only tell these stories, but to recognize that everybody has a story.
Yeah.
And to listen to the story. I believe you mentioned it earlier, with empathy and grace.
Yes.
Because it could be any one of us that are impacted by something that we now have to try and figure out, okay, how do we move forward from here? So no, I appreciate you. To close out, if you could offer one thought or a piece of encouragement to share with any of the listeners or viewers about making progress, achieving goals, staying on track as they're trying to get to their goal, what would it be?
Yeah. I would say a rising tide lifts all ships, right? And what that means to me is we all have a sense of responsibility to give something back to others around us in the community. If you, and this is biblical, right? If you live your life with works of service to others, helping other people, lifting them up, good things are going to come back to you. It's not just biblical, it's karmic, and it's, every religion around the world has principles of engaging with others in a way that's positive and beneficial, and how that ultimately has a benefit to you. That is absolutely real in every day-to-day sense. So the words of wisdom I would have is lift up the community, help others, volunteer, be nice to people, and good things will come back to you. You will see that success.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the amazing conversation. And thank you to all that's taking the time to listen or watch this podcast conversation. If this has resonated with you in any way, shape, or form, please feel free to share it out there. We definitely want to continue to make an impact. As Ron said, a rising tide lifts all ships, and that is one of the things that we strive to do here. And for the members of the NEXTKNOWN community, I would love to hear from you. Who are some individuals that you would love to hear from? Your suggestions help to shape and mold the content that we create here and the membership that we have. So your suggestions really help to show the power of network and relationship building. So until next time, my name is Kinard Robinson. We'll see you soon.
Guess I'm awake now. Timeline reminding me it ain't safe now. Why would I cape now?